Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. The Immortals, written by Ogosh. The Immortals of Condrai, the Festival of the Dead. Robert Applegate, National Geographic, August 7th, 2391. As a part of the Nat Geo faraway team stationed in the 4th Arm, my job is to normally accompany the Unit. Kepler on its scouting mission through the sector, learning about the Marines and photographing the sights which we find along the way. During this trip, however, I have found that the more interesting parts of our excursions often take place on shore leave. One of such excursions, the captain had dismissed our ship for 3 days on the planet of Condrai, a temperate planet roughly the size of Mars, second from the star and inhabited by the Lenma. We landed in the human military base of Fort Ken, and were instructed that day trips into the nearby city were possible as long as we did not disturb the locals. I did not know what the captain meant at first, assuming that he would just want us to keep our noses clean. But after my first trip out, it became increasingly apparent that there was a deeper wisdom in his words. We had, quite serendipitously, arrived in Condrai during the midwinter festival which they call Catvendesset Ora, translating loosely as Feast of the Honored Dead. The closest approximation I can make in human cultures is Dia de la Muertos of Mexico. Citizens observed memorial services where the names of recently deceased families and friends on bright multicolored cloths attached to their clothing feast and tell stories. When I arrived in the city, I was encouraged by my guide to head straight to the city hall, where the patriarch of the town's clan was set to give a speech, marking the official beginning of the festival. The speech itself is fairly standard fare for anyone who has heard a politician speak, but what I found most interesting is that at the end of the speech was a nearly half-an-hour-long list of names, spoken aloud, and seemingly from memory by the patriarch. Quick searches through my database of a few of these names revealed that many of them were heroes in some way. War heroes, some centuries old, artists, politicians, philosophers, spiritual leaders, etc. But what was most surprising to me is that nearing the end of the list, among the barrage of Lenma names, the patriarch spoke the human name Janie Wessel. I was stunned. In the middle of this crowd of Lenma, the only human for a kilometer in any direction, the leader of these people had spoken the name of one of my own. As I looked around, trying to pull myself back to present, I saw that several Lenma around me were staring, most with a look of curiosity, others with looks of reserved pride. Following the speech, the crowd dissipated to return to their festivities, while I tried desperately to drudge through the crowd to the podium, where the patriarch was speaking to the side with his men. I arrived too late to speak with him, but I did manage to flag down one of his assistants. After explaining my situation and the effect that Dame Janie Wessel had on me, I was able to schedule a brief interview with the patriarch 2 days later. In the time leading up to my interview, I headed to the human embassy to learn more about Miss Wessel. The embassy itself was not hard to find. Among the round and soft corners of Lemma buildings, the human embassy was a 2-story Victorian estate in the downtown core. Janie Mary Wessel, I would learn, was the first human ambassador to the Lenma some 60 years ago. On a first meeting with the previous patriarch, she was accidentally introduced as the matriarch of the clan Humanity. Although the matter was quickly corrected, the Lenma found humor in continuing to refer to her as matriarch in casual conversation. Janie had worked alongside several patriarchs from a dozen clans to ensure human interests on Condrai were held, and to open avenues of trade between two homeworlds. And although she would be considered by many Earthlings to be a relatively unimportant political figure in the grand scheme, she was instrumental in building a positive relationship between our peoples. When she died on May 19th, 2344, she was mourned on 2 worlds. But I would learn about her most amazing contribution in 2 days. The day of my interview with the Patriarch had arrived, and I was exploding with questions. The Patriarch, Deco Manma, to his credit, was very patient with me, answering as best as he could. As the interview went on, I stopped asking questions about Lenma, and my interest turned to the cat Bendassa to Aura and Janie Wessel. I was shocked to learn that the festival was actually only 30 years old, a newly founded tradition started by the clans. Ma explained that they of course honored their dead for much longer, but never in the manner that they had after the death of Miss Wessel. As it turned out, Janie herself was responsible for the Cat Vendisa to Aura becoming an annual festival for the Lenma. Ma then took me out of his office into the foyer where a glass display case stood at the point of honor, containing a picture of Janie, as well as what appeared to be a quote-a-day calendar. The quote of that particular day happened to be, "They say you die twice, one time when you stop breathing, and a second time, a bit later on, when somebody says your name for the last time." A quote attributed to a 21st century artist named Banksy, but it is more properly quoted by an American Professor Irvin Yellum and author David Eagleman. Patriarch Mama explained that after Wessel's passing, the clans came together and passed a unanimous legislation to create a festival that honored the idea of keeping the dead alive through speaking their names aloud. I felt, probably selfishly, flattered. Months later, when I returned to my office in London, my experience on Condri had not left me. I'm happy to say I take something positive away from every expedition I go on, be it a trinket of good times, or even a new way of looking at the world. From Condri, I took away a small piece of colourful cloth with the name of Janie Wessel printed on it, which I keep in my wallet. Every once in a while I'll see a teal or copper corner of the cloth sticking out, smile, and say Janie Wessel aloud to myself. Robert Applegate, National Geographic, August 7th, 2391. End of story. Story number 2. Cracked Earth, written by Gulganash. The Earth Hive swarmed to the stars in the hundreds of billions, claiming every world that they got their claws on as their own. We fought valiantly, but we were beginning to lose hope as a seemingly endless sword plunged into our territory like a knife. That was when we saw the true terror of humanity. Rather than accept the losses of their worlds, they ravaged their own planets, burning all biomatter, poisoning all water, occasionally even destroying it with the most powerful ship, the HFS Kraken. Despite their fierce fighting, or maybe because of it, the Irith Hive fought single-mindedly to get Sol, the human home system. Despite their billions of losses, they first tried to make the colony out of a dwarf planet, Pluto. That was at the outer edge, but the Kraken turned its space station-sized guns towards its own system and disintegrated the entire ball of ice. The Irith were determined, though, and managed to land on the human homeworld of Earth. We thought for sure the humans would give in, having lost their capital. But they kept fighting. They saw that they were going to lose their planet in advance and evacuated billions before the Irith made it. Then they destroyed it. Earth, their homeworld, with uncounted millennia of history gone in an instant, taking with it hundreds of millions of Irith and almost as many humans who were unable to evacuate or sacrifice themselves to keep their plan secret. We were horrified, to say the least. They had sacrificed their homeworld and kept fighting. Their tactics became crueler and more extreme. They lost Sol, but their other systems increased their productions. The HFS Kraken received a sister ship, the HFS Slayer, and they began the unthinkable, almost as unthinkable as destroying their own planets. The two planet destroyers went through slip space deep into Iris territory, to their home system, Araya, with only a few support ships to help protect and supply them. Then they repeated what they did to a dozen of their own planets, to the half-dozen hive planets in the system, obliterating the Hive Queen. Then they warped out of the system before the disorganized and traumatized Irith could respond, slipping to every major system of theirs and mercilessly destroying their greatest planets, killing tens of billions of them with each planet. We were horrified. They had broken one of the primary rules of warfare: do not destroy planets. We knew that we would have to pass judgment on them, but feared what we would do. For if they destroyed their own homeworld, how would they fight against us? They seemed unstoppable and bent on destroying every lost Irith. But when we turned to their home system a few years later, we saw a strange occurrence. The humans were building massive metal spheres where Earth had been, most of it barely a metal frame for it, with only a few island-sized sections and a sphere covered in carved metal. We asked them what it was, and they simply said, "A monument." We read the writing that was on the sections already there, and were stunned. It was the name of the humans, each of them, from one of the planets they had destroyed. Millions of names were scattered across its surface, with drones constantly being updated with new deaths and carving their names into the monument. And it had only been started a year ago, with less than 5% of it complete. It would be a representative and reminder of the primal determination of humanity, and how they would succeed at any cost. We ended up letting them off with a warning once they'd finally ceased their efforts, having killed trillions of the Irith and destroying their intelligence from their lack of their hive mind. For, to be honest, we were terrified. Humanity had shed its innocence, killing billions of their own to stop their enemy. We had thought that we were the most capable of war, for we had more advanced technology. But technology is no match for human insanity. But in the Iron Scourge, we learned that truth. End of story. The algorithm reckons you should be watching this video next, and I recommend that you should be always watching my video. So, click with energy! And yes, clicking that does help the channel. Thank you very much. I would just quickly like to give thanks to our Tier 5 members: Elithia, Barky, Feudicuel, Meridian 117, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Albarden Gusta, Savage Patch Papa, and Lord Azrakal.